My first kind of experience with electronic music in a live setting goes way back, into the early 80s, where a lot of kind of, bands were experimenting with electronic music, with synthesizers, drum machines, all this sort of stuff. And, a lot of the music that is still relatable today comes from kind of early sounds of Kraftwerk, Gary Newman, Cars, the kind of bands were kind of experimenting with keyboards, Herbie Hancock, Rocket, all this music that I was really exposed to, I loved, because it was just something futuristic, something that we wasn't expecting to be basically inspired by for so many years, even still today. If you can imagine that most of the music that was being made at that time was from bands. So, you have a guitarist, you have a drummer, you'd have a lead vocalist, all this sort of stuff. And Kraftwerk had none of that. They literally just had four guys, literally playing music from the computers. They were the blueprint, really, in what we're listening to today. A lot of the early music was already dabbling with synthesized sounds, and I was always had one ear on musicianship and the other ear on the electronic side of what was pushing envelopes. And I would imagine at one point in my time in life where I actually discovered pure electronic music being generated and played and performed by Jean-Michel Jarre as an album called Oxygen, Part 1 and Part 2. And when you got to hear this record, there was no one particular track, because the whole album, A and B side, was the track. And as you can imagine, till today, that kind of performance of electronic music is still revered as one of the all-time greats of a moment of what basically turned the whole industry on its head based on what is possible with electronic music. It just grew and grew and grew. Did I know it was going to get as big as it ever was? Absolutely not. I gave the scene from 1988 5 years, and that was it. Move on to something else. And 30 odd years later, we're still here, still developing, and still, trying to reinvent the wheel even more so now today than ever before. 3-deck mixing really came about where I just wanted to perfect, to begin with, the art of 2-deck mixing. So I was always in my mum and dad's house at the time, just cutting two records together, whether it be two records of Good Times by Chic, or it was Herbie Hancock Rocket, and cutting two records out of that, or just cutting records anyway. I was very influenced by the hip-hop scene, and my whole, I would say, career was based on the artistry of how you mixed and cut and introduced the music in the way that you could do it. But I wanted to step out of just someone that was just mixing with two records, and to see what I could do with three. And it's almost like spinning plates. You get one plate, you spin that one, you get another one, you spin that one. It's like, oh, can you do a third one? You get the other one, you go, oh, here we go. And you spin that one, and you try and keep them all together, keep them going. Well, that's what mixing's like, especially from an analog point of view with vinyl. And there wasn't even a mixer that had a channel for a third turntable. I had to create a preamp with another mixer and then create the signal path for the third channel on a mixer that I was using as an auxiliary, just so I had a channel to put a third turntable on. So it was very, very early days of learning how to do this, but also the thing was, I used the third turntable as a third turntable. It wasn't just a turntable for effects or noises. I would literally have two copies of one record and one copy of another record, and then between each other just mix that together and actually create a new version of a record that you kind of currently know, but I did it in the way that I did it. And people really was excited by it. Most people would turn up to see me do free turntable mixing and literally standing in front of the turntables just to see me mess it up every single time. And I would just mix the records together, and I say, oh, nothing to see here, go out and listen and dance and enjoy yourself. And I suppose one of my famous mixes of the time, of which I was known for, was having two copies of Little Louis' French Kiss, and I had a copy of another record by Doug Lazy called Let It Roll, and I used the a cappella from that record. So I would double beat Little Louis French Kiss track, and I would put the acapella and cut the acapella in and out of these two records and completely create the remix of Little Louis French Kiss on that. I never recorded it. I always did it live, and it was the thing that was my signature kind of mix. And then eventually I was just basically throwing anything in the mix based on my idea of making certain mixes out of tracks of which people were just not expected at all. And I was just enjoying myself by doing it every single time. Loved Rave's Berlin. It was over 1 million people, and if you can imagine where I came from in life as a DJ growing up in a very small town called Carshalton in Surrey in the UK. And some people would know it, most people don't. And I used to do school discos and family birthday parties and this kind of things. And at that particular time, my biggest audience in my early days was probably around about 50 to 60 people. And then throughout my career, and eventually I ended up being invited to play at Berlin's Love Parade to over 1 million people. And basically being at the Brandenburg Gate, it's an area where the park is absolutely fantastic. It has a lot of rich history, as you can imagine. And here we are with me in the middle of the statual monument of where the DJs were performing from. And they have a kind of circular sound system around that. Had every record that I played had to count. Each DJ was only playing 20 minutes per slot. And when I first did it, I didn't know what to think, to be honest with you, because I never really thought that my career would take me to such a place where we're now performing live to more people than the Rolling Stones have ever played to, as a DJ. And for me, this was a testament to the celebration of electronic music right there. It was a phenomena, and nobody saw that coming. So basically, back in the UK, they decided to have this idea of if you were dancing more than 4 or 5 people around repetitive music, that you would be liable to end up in jail and do community service or something. They wanted to kind of cull the rave scene getting any bigger. So the bill was passed at the House of the Parliament to do that, and they gave the police carte blanche to enforce it on a countrywide scale. So, and which they did. In the end of the day, the thing was, the people in the end of the day revolted against it. They had so many different petitions and protests events that the government had to pander to what was going to happen, whether they liked it or not. And with that, the people have spoken. So it was a very, very big thing for young people to get the government to understand that we need this in our lives. We don't want to have to be subjected to going home at 2 o'clock in the morning. We don't want to be subjected to not being able to dance with more than 4 people around us. We want to dance with 1,000 people around us. And then years later, I get asked to do a charity event, which was stemmed from the House of the Parliament, and I was asked to basically have people come to the House of the Parliament and to support this charity called a DJ Saved My Life Foundation, which was amazing actually. One of the funniest things that happened there when we were setting up the sound system, where everyone has their talks in the House of the Parliament, they could hear the bass line, and they were asking us if we could turn it down a little bit. The irony was very, very high. Like, we could hear a kick drum. Can you get them to turn it down a little bit? It was hilarious. And then some of them came to the party and everything. And things have changed.